What's up, Coordination? This is a special episode of the GreenPilled Pod in which we're going to announce season 2 of the GreenPilled Podcast, which is going to be about Regenerative Society. Regenerative Society is basically what happens when you take decentralized identity and you apply it to blockchain-based systems. So you might have heard the phrase that the blockchain is a dark forest. I think that using decentralized identity, that's the lamp that can light the dark forest. Once you see who your counterparty is in a digital economic system, then that allows you to play more positive sum games over time with that system as you accrue reputation over time. And so we're going to be exploring these themes of decentralized identity and positive sum games in season 2 of the GreenPilled Podcast. So TLDR, Regenerative Society, Decentralized Identity, Positive Sum Games is what we're going to be talking about in season 2 of the pod. You can drop now and move on to the next episode, which will be the first episode of season 1 of the GreenPilled Pod, if that's enough for you. And if not, you can spend the next 10 or 15 minutes listening to me talk a little bit about my thesis for Regenerative Society. So going to share my screen here, and we're going to talk a little bit about Regenerative Society, which I basically think is decentralized society, the idea of a network of attestations about digital identity, adding coordination layers on top of that, and that's how you get Regenerative Society. So basically, if you didn't catch the episode about decentralized society with Pooja and Glenn, basically what you have in a decentralized society is 3 entities: a attesting identity, basically an account that is making an attestation, issuing a soul-bound token or a verifiable credential that represents or encodes a part of the account state or history, and the attestee. So basically, who is making the attestation. So basically what we're doing over time here is there's a bunch of different attestations that can happen, whether it's a token of appreciation, a active loan, a proof of repayment, a active rental, a Gitcoin grants contribution, a POAP, a proof of voting. There's a bunch of different attestations that we could all be making about each other. And if you start to put those into a directed graph in which you have attester 1 attesting something to attestee 2, who is attesting further to a third person, what you're starting to get is this deeply liquid market of people who are attesting to each other. And that is really, really exciting to me because what it enables is intersectional identity. So basically you can see who is a part of what communities, what relationships do people have to each other. And once you do have those attestations, you can start to make use cases and create utility off the back of those attestations. If you're a Gitcoin grants user, you may have already gotten an airdrop from being on Gitcoin grants. And that, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg for what identity can do in these ecosystems when we get a deeply liquid network at scale, under collateralized lending, sybil resistance, plural identity that creates cooperation across social distance, and lots and lots and lots of other good stuff. So basically, we can quantify the social proximity of all the different accounts in the Ethereum ecosystem, create cooperation across distance by looking at Alice and what attestations have been made about Alice and comparing those to the attestations that have been made about Bob. And the sum of that is the intersectional identity of the Web3 space. So that's decentralized society. That's a vision from Vitalik and Pooja. And I just want to sprinkle a little bit of Gitcoin on Gitcoin's ethos on top of that to tell you about how Gitcoin, I think, has been the tip of the spear for me understanding regenerative society. And I'm no longer contributing much to Gitcoin DAO, have since disaffiliated from Gitcoin DAO, but it's just the deepest depth of knowledge that I have about how this ecosystem is going to work is through Gitcoin. So Gitcoin's purpose is to empower communities to build and fund their shared needs. And basically what Gitcoin is doing is running quadratic funding that has delivered $65 million worth of funding to communities in the Web3 ecosystem, and that creates object level impact for the public good. Now, Gitcoin grants is based off of quadratic funding, which is based off of digital identity. So I think that we've been sort of front running this idea of a regenerative society and a network of identity by running these experiments for the last 3 years. And that's what sort of informed how I think about this space is that Gitcoin's impact so far has been $65 million worth of funding for public goods. That's what Gitcoin is best known for. But if you look at it on its side, Gitcoin grants is actually dependent on something called sybil resistance, which is preventing attackers from making up accounts and trying to get too much of the matching pool because they've made up a bunch of accounts. And so if you turn it on its side, Gitcoin is basically a red team, blue team adversarial game that happens every quarter between the Gitcoin DAO, which is trying to create sybil resistance, sock puppet resistance, and the red team, the bad guys and bad girls that are trying to create sock puppets that are trying to steal the matching pool. And so, since I've had a frontline view of this red team, blue team game over the last 3 years or so, of the $65 million worth of funding on public goods, and we've been trying to maximize coordination over time, I have sort of a vision of how we can meet our shared needs, how we can coordinate better and maximize the upside of decentralized society. So basically, the idea here is, if you're looking for the perfect mechanism of how we can all meet our shared needs and coordinate better through these networks of attestations, create positive sum games, then you're kind of looking at a search space in which you're trying to maximize the amount of coordination and the ability to reach our shared needs that you can do together in a certain fitness landscape. So we've been basically discovering mechanisms over the last several years in which we can meet our shared needs and create maximum coordination. Starting with centralized quadratic funding. Gitcoin was built centralized in 2017. It's my fault. We built it wrong. And we've evolved into pairwise quadratic funding over the last 3 years of running the experiment. And basically, the idea is that the future is optimizing for plural coordination devices, building decentralized pairwise quadratic funding. But then what would it look like if Gitcoin, POAP, Bright ID, Apollo, all of these other digital identity tools, Ceramic, Disco ID, Spruce ID, started creating DIDs, started creating soulbound tokens, and bootstrapped all of these other beautiful things that decentralized society can create? DSOC quadratic funding, under collateralized lending, UBI experiments. I think that there is a global maxima that regenerates humanity and individual communities at scale. And I think that that is what we're exploring the design space of in season 2 of the Green Pill podcast. Big opportunity that you'll hear us talk a lot about in season 2 of the Green Pill podcast is one human, one vote DAOs. So basically moving from one token, one vote DAOs that are dominated by capital to one human, one vote DAOs that are dominated by people. Core part of bringing Ethereum and Web3 to more and more people across the world is giving them use cases that they can actually use. 99% of humanity, their lives is not, their financial lives is not their investments. They don't have much capital on their family balance sheets, but they do have their jobs and how they use the internet as their financial lives. What would it mean to create more democratic DAOs and high resolution democracy that allows them to participate in these systems? That is a big part of decentralized society. You may have seen my talk at ETC. Gitcoin just launched Gitcoin Passport, which is a transportable proof of personhood identity system for the Web3 space. It aggregates stamps, which are basically decentralized society edges and nodes, and then through a privacy aware mechanism allows you to build your sybil resistant identity across the DWeb, across decentralized society. And it's all bootstrapped with the data that Gitcoin has been accumulating for the last 3 years with Gitcoin grants and the knowledge of how sybil resistance works at Gitcoin grants. So you can imagine that there will be a plurality of building blocks for a better internet being created over the next several years in the next capital flow rotation cycle in the Web3 space as we move from bear to bull and back again. We're going to build these building blocks for a better internet. They're going to enable more plural cooperation, more positive sum games because you can see who your counterparty is, and more quadratic funding, more quadratic voting, more Gini coefficient measurements, more UBI, one person, one vote DAOs, data collective, sybil resistant airdrops, more utility for the average person. And that's what regenerative society is about. So I'm going to talk a little bit this season about Passport, which is kind of like the state machine that Gitcoin is building in order to ingest all of this data and provide utility to everyday users. So taking any on-chain or off-chain data, Web 2 or Web 3, ETLing, which is just a computer speak way of saying transferring the data into a DID or a verifiable credential that is stored in a privacy-preserving way on the Ceramic network, leveraging LIP protocol for privacy. And then from there, once you've got that network of attestations, you can build an aggregator or an aggregator if you're a meme lord, and you can create a personhood score. You can create a lending score. And what's key about these scores is that they're bottoms up. So basically, we're not talking about like Chinese social credit score types things. We're talking about communities creating their own, according to their own values, what scores matter to them. For Gitcoin, it happens to be civil resistance, but you could fork this pipeline and you could build it for any sort of thing that you care about within regenerative society. And then you can provide more utility to people once they have a personhood score on Gitcoin. So Passport is kind of the tip of the spear in how Gitcoin is understanding civil resistance, but this whole chain could be forked in order to bring other utility to other types of use cases. And did I mention that the whole thing is privacy aware and built for privacy from the bottoms up? So basically, when you're using Gitcoin Passport, you're getting the personhood score of an Ethereum address, but you are not getting any personally identifiable information about them, which I think is key to making this whole regenerative society thing work at a web scale perspective. So stamps, data sources you can collect in Gitcoin Passport today are Bright ID, our proof of humanity, and your Twitter account, your Google account, your Discord account. You can ingest all of that into your Gitcoin Passport, and you can instantly get utility on Gitcoin Grants, who will be the first integration partner that also derives from Gitcoin civil resistance. I don't know. We'll see. But, there's other tools out there. It's not all about Gitcoin Passport. That's just the one that I know the best. And so that's what the sort of intersection of this podcast is going to be with Regenerative Society. And hopefully together with the coalition of the willing in the Web3 space that is working on Regenerative Society, that is working on Decentralized Society, that is trying to create positive sum games, can bootstrap a network effects of more DApps that are building utility like this, which creates more users. And I'm not just talking about financial users who are building collateralized loans and other DeFi stuff. I'm talking about everyday people who are collecting stamps, creating more personhood scores, which creates more DApps that have more utility for civil resistant use cases, more DApps building UBI, Web3 onboarding, creating POAPs for users, creating data collectives, creating more utility for everyday users. And then we build this flywheel that solves the cold start problem of reputation in the Web3 space. And that's why I'm so excited about season 2 of the GreenPilled podcast, which again is about regenerative society. So decentralized society plus maximum coordination plus this Gitcoin ethos of creating positive sum games equals a regenerative society. And so I think that the North Star of what's being built here is adherent to the cypherpunk ideals, advocating for widespread use of strong cryptography and privacy enhancing technologies as a route to social and political change, to the solar punk movement, which is an art movement that envisions how the future of humanity might look if we succeeded in solving our contemporary challenges with sustainability and with positive sum games for everyday people. The intersection of that is what is going to be built within regenerative society. I think that we will be studying how the Web3 community might engineer capital rotation away from projects with just the best Ponzi-nomics and towards projects with the most real-world impact. In order to test this thesis, you have to have projects that are having real-world impact. In order to have real-world impact, you've got to have positive sum games. In order to have positive sum games, you need to have identity. Oh, wait, we're back at regenerative society. That's why we're looking at regenerative society. We're going to be looking at fragility and anti-fragility this season. So basically, how does the resource allocation of a community over time go from being fragile, which basically means if there's a shock event, it goes down over time, to becoming resilient, which is how these systems adapt to shock events, to anti-fragile, which basically our systems get stronger when shock events are applied to them. I don't know about you, but this is on my mind after Terra, Luna, Three Arrows Capital, Voyager, Celsius, all these systems that collapsed because they were just so freaking fragile. How do we build anti-fragile systems that are bootstrapped on sound first principles mathematics and cryptoeconomics and game theory in order to build regenerative society? Fragile projects front run their actual maximum sustainable growth by creating this Ponzi-like curve in which they all go up and there's like this blow off top and then the whole thing goes down over time. But what would it look like if we extended our time preference out and looked for the projects that have sustainable growth, that don't aim to create this sort of like blow off top in which in which the whole thing collapses, but instead adapts and only grows in a sustainable way? I think that this is how you create a system that provides utility to people is by giving them something that they can sustainably depend upon over time. On a short time preference, the Ponzi schemes will win. On a longer time preference, things that have sustainable growth and actually create utility for the world and do it in an anti-fragile way are going to be the ones that work. Been very deeply inspired by Buckminster Fuller's quote, his vision of making the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or disadvantage of anyone. I think that's a North Star. It's a beautiful North Star. I won't say that the space has figured it out yet, but I do think that decentralized society and coordination is a way that it could get there. So what I'm saying is season 2 of the Green Pill podcast, what if we could engineer a capital rotation towards projects with actual object level impact? What if we build a sybil resistance? What if we build a more lunar punk, solar punk, cypherpunk world and build a regenerative society? And that is what you'll be hearing over the next 20 episodes or so on the Green Pill pod. Season 2 guest list is all decentralized identity and positive sum games. Bright ID, Opala, Filecoin Green, Orca, Brian Ford, who pioneered a lot of sybil resistance stuff pre-crypto, Humanode, Chase Chapman, SBF, Daniel Ehrlichman, Ceramic Disco, Good Dollar, Spruce, Polygon ID, more and more episodes with Daniel Schmachtenberger. I'm just name dropping now, but it's because I'm so excited about our guest list and how it intersects with what I think is the future of Ethereum, which is regenerative society, decentralized society, more positive sum games, and more coordination. So let's build a regenerative society. That is going to be the theme of Green Pill Season 2. I will see you on the Ethernet, and I hope you enjoy the Season 2 of the Green Pill podcast. Got ahead of myself there. I'm very excited about this. I will see you on the Ethernet. Peace and love, coordination.